Hi everybody. So first of all, I'd like to apologize because I lied. It's really not three things, it's actually five things. Um, it's just that two of them you already know, and I'll go over those two really quickly, and then the rest will kind of go into a little bit more depth. And hopefully it's not just for a faculty job. Hopefully the three things are the first two you'll see, but the three things that I'll go to in depth will actually help anyone getting any job. So, so first I'll start off with a little bit of my background, how I got to St. Jude, my little St. Jude story. And then I'll talk to you about those five things. And of course, yes, one of them is in fact networking, but maybe not in the position where you think it is. And then I'll do a Ask Me Anything about my time at St. Jude, the faculty search, startup packages, negotiation, where I interviewed, all that stuff. Any questions you have about that process, I'll be happy to ask you that, answer that. But if you want to leave after I kind of finish with the talking points and you don't have any of those questions, feel free to leave because I know you all are busy. So I will not be offended if you all kind of get up and leave after that point. I'll even have a slide, it's in the slide saying feel free to leave. So with that in mind, let's get into it. So the disclaimer as well. So my path is a very non-conventional one. It is not kind of the traditional path that most people say, this is how to get a faculty job. Go, do these particular things. But I think these are things that helped me on my path, things that helped, things that just kind of really helped me, things out of the box that might help you if you kind of couple those with some of the more conventional wisdom as far as getting a faculty job. So this is not the only path by any means. So my story actually started off with music. I went to Duke University where I was a music major. I did not have a science major, which made things kind of interesting. And then about right after my first semester senior year, I had kind of a divine intervention that led me into science. In that particular process, I used a lot of informational interviews before I knew they were called informational interviews, and where I said, how do I get a job in science? So I got a lab technician job with a guy named Jeff Frelinger, who at that time he was the chair of microbiology and immunology. Worked with him for 2 years, and he basically flat out said to me, maybe about a couple months after I was hired, he's like, you were not the most qualified person for this position. I was like, all right, well, thanks, but he hired me, thought I had a good ability to learn, and the things that were on that particular job weren't really anything that was, everything had to be taught to you. You couldn't, you had to have that experience being taught. So from there, I went to grad school while at UNC in the Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics, worked with Matt Redenbaugh doing structural biology. From there, I met Linda Harris when she came and talked at a postdoc boot camp, and this is kind of a little funny story I'll tell you real quick. So, we had this postdoc boot camp, how to become a successful postdoc, and she was like the keynote speaker. So they said, does anybody want to interview with her? And I said, oh, sure, why not? I'll go in there, I'll interview. This will be great, good practice for going to to actually interview for a postdoc position. So it's about 20 minutes before the interview, and, where is St. Jude? I don't even know where St. Jude is. So I'm like looking up last-minute facts on St. Jude, and it turns out I talked to a person in my lab. Her name is Monica, a good friend of mine still today, and said, well, we have a collaborator at St. Jude. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right, human carboxyl esterase, Phil Potter. All right, this is great. So I sit down in the interview with Linda Harris, and I say, hi, yes, I'm Michael Johnson. I work in Matt Redenbaugh's lab. All of a sudden, she deadpan says, Matt Redenbaugh? Yeah, and it's like, and we have a collaboration with St. Jude. Yes, with Phil Potter. I'm like, does she know everything at St. Jude? Whoa, this is crazy. It turns out Phil Potter was her husband, so that made everything a little bit more relaxed throughout that particular process. He said, yeah, come on in, let's talk to us, and we'll do that kind of thing. So lo and behold, here I am at St. Jude. So that's the first story. Kind of my background. The second story is one of those music stories when I was in high school, and this will bring me to my point one that you all already know, and you'll see why. When I was in inner city Chicago, South Side, single parent home, play the violin for me, whatever. But, I had a chip on my shoulder as far as being, in the inner city. I tried out for this thing called All-State Jazz Band. So All-State Jazz Band, everybody comes in, they try out, they play a piece, they do a little improvisation, and I'm like, well, I'm competing against all these suburban kids that have all these resources. And I got in there and I realized that when, it was a blind audition, I couldn't really notice who was in there playing. All I heard was the sound of their instrument. So I said, well, I can get the sound of my instrument to be good. All it needs is a little bit of hard work, which is hard work. I mean, like, everybody here is working hard. So, I mean, that's the step one. That's the one that you all kind of already know. Like, you're here, you're working hard. That's no secret to the process of trying to become a PI. The second one, and you're not necessarily going to like this one, but it's actually luck. I mean, I'm not naive. I'm not an idiot. I know there was a certain component of luck to this particular process. And kind of the sooner you understand that sometimes, you can move on and kind of do the things that are within your power to actually try and get the position that you seek. So that's going to bring me to the actual points that I'm going to talk about today. So as you can see, big on the bottom is networking. We have professional development, and we have the brand at the top. So those are the big 3 points. However, most people say, oh, you got to network, you got to network, you got to network. In my opinion, actually, that is flipped on top, flipped. On the bottom, on the base, holding everything in balance is actually your brand, who you are. And we're going to do some things, that's what the sticky notes are for, to figure out who you are and what your particular brand is. And just for a little added effect, yes, that is lava, and things can teeter on your brand, because if your brand is bad, then no networking in the world is going to get you anywhere. So the first time I actually heard about personal branding, I was at UNC talking to a woman named Pat Phelps. She was kind of like she led all the student development for the grad school at UNC. She went from there, did the same thing at NIH. Then she said, okay, well, now I'll make an exhibit for the Smithsonian Museum about DNA. So she kind of got around. Now she's actually doing the grad student and postdoc development at Hopkins. So, she kind of moved up the ranks pretty quickly. So she, to move up like that, you kind of need to know what you're talking about. So when she talked, I actually listened. So we were walking back from the lab one day, back to her office, and she said, do you know Sabrice? This guy named Sabrice. It's like, yeah, I know Sabrice. And she asked me, what comes into your head when you think about Sabrice? And I said, he's good in lab, good person to talk to, has a good reputation, kind of a stand-up guy. And she looked at me and she said, well, that's his personal brand. That's his brand. So that's, when you hear his name, that's what pops into your head. So my question to you is, what is your personal brand? So now this is what the stickies are for, right? So grab that pen and paper, hopefully the sticky, or if you have it in your notebook. And what I would like you to do is write down 3 to 5 words that you would consider are your brand. And I have a little something, down there. Hopefully you're not too desperate for those words, but just think about some examples, some of the things that, if you think about, what is your personal brand? I'll actually tell you mine and explain how I see each of those words moving forward. But, just take a minute or so, take 2 minutes, and actually, think to yourself, write down a few words, what you think your personal brand is. So this is definitely not a time to be modest or shy. I mean, this is, if you were selling yourself to someone, well, not like that. If you were really kind of promoting yourself, probably a better word there. If you were promoting yourself, these are the words that you would, use, or you would hope that somebody would use on your behalf. So think about those words. So are you, a communicator? Are you somebody who just knows a lot about one particular topic and you're the expert in that particular topic? Are you strategic? Are you, just, so everybody have some, at least 3 words, 2 words, 1 word, any words? Because having those words, you kind of need them for the next particular part of this talk, the next thing. So the challenge is now to find a buddy. So pair off or do that. And what you're going to do now is you're going to have a short conversation with the person next to you. You do not need to know this person, but if you do, that's also okay. So, and what I want you to do is actually just think of a story that personifies or that exemplifies some of the things that you just wrote down as far as your personal brand. I know this is kind of hard to do on the spot. Hopefully after this you will kind of think of these words a little bit more carefully. But yeah, so go ahead, turn, talk. I did not know there would be participation. So hopefully you're taking some turns here, giving the other person a chance to speak as well. Explain who they are about their particular brand. Hopefully you're not necessarily using those words. So in talking to your neighbor and talking to people, I don't mean to cut you particularly short. Hopefully you've all had a chance to kind of talk to each other. But ask the other person now, did you, show the person you're talking to your words, let them know what your words were, and kind of ask yourself, did you kind of get some of those words from what their story was, how they were talking? So, I mean, you can directly ask them. Hmm? All right. We'll give you maybe 1 more minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay. So in kind of looking at your partner, I'll just kind of look at it for a general consensus of nods of the head. But did your partner? Did you get a sense of the other person's brand from what they were telling you? Yes, kind of, no. If yes, can somebody give me an example? Anybody want to give me an example? I know most of your names, so I will call on you. What's up? Okay, all right, there's one. Are there any examples that, and not to necessarily call you out, but are there any examples that people who didn't necessarily get that brand from? So I'll just kind of make quick eye contact. You don't have to rat them out. Okay. No. Anyway, so so these are my words. Whether or not they're a pipe dream or not, these are my words. These are the things that I try and strive for. This is what I hope my brand is when I was at UNC, when I'm here at St. Jude. These are the words that when I try and act in lab, outside of lab, when talking to people, these are the 5 words that I try to be, or the 5 statements that I try to be. The thing with your brand is, if you don't take control of your brand, if you don't control that particular conversation, then other people are going to brand you. And sometimes that can be a good thing, but I would prefer to be in control of my own brand, in control of who I am in this particular situation. So, what do you really want these words to say about you? What do you want out of this? So, especially scientifically, you think maybe in a relationship outside of the lab, but what I'm really trying to get you to think of in a lab context, in a scientific context, what is your identity within your lab? Who are you within your lab? Because that's important. The 3 things are, again, branding, professional development, and then networking. The question I have for you is, how is your network going to work for you if they don't know who you are? If they don't know who you are, how can they actually work for you? It's like, oh, such and such, I'm looking for well, I don't know what kind of person this is. I don't know who this person is trying to be yet. So they're not going to fight as hard for you because they don't know who you are. So take the bull by the horns, take control of your brand, and really give them something to work with. Otherwise, they're spinning their wheels. Your network is useless if you don't have a brand. Your network will be useless if you don't have that professional development. They won't know what to do with you, okay? So if you have your words, what I want you to do later is I want you to take your words and try and expand on them. Really come up with 3 true words and really come up with the why behind why you think those words are for you. Ask somebody in your lab, what do you think my brand is? You can even ask maybe somebody at home, scientifically. When I speak about science, what do you hear from that? About who I am. So my words are legacy, not just to leave one little mark, but actually leave, things, not just one thing, but things here that will last. So I worked hard to do that. I did local outreach on the council. I started the DNA Day here that the NIH started. I started a podcast that the institution is going to take over. So I wanted those to be things that were in place before I left and that will be still in place as I leave. Connector. Networking is usually thought of something that's your benefit, but I wanted to be a benefit to other people as far as connecting them with other people. So I want to help you network. It kind of just moved past looking at myself for that particular networking idea. I say global mentor because it's just pretty much mentoring all types of people. I wanted to, if you look at my scientific tombstone at the end of my life, I wanted to say, here lies Michael. He was a great mentor. He was a great scientist too, but he was a great mentor. And some people are the opposite, and that's fine. But I know that's something about me. I want my tombstone to read that. Strategist. So I want to be known as someone who has, if you need to accomplish A, here are the things that you need to do to get to. You need to go through B, C, and D before you can get back to A. And scientific communicator, I've done a lot of things with blogs and Twitter and that types of things, and I'll go into a little bit of that later. Those things might not be for you, but those things could potentially help you, and I'll tell you some easy ways that that you can get into them. So again, if you don't know who you are, sorry about that. If you don't know who you are, how can you expect anybody in your network to? Other people will just readily define you, and that can be fine too. But again, I think it's better to have control in that situation. You can use what they say, but it's better to have the control in that situation. Oops. And so as you're doing this process, when you're thinking about these words, when you have a little bit of downtime in that 5-minute spin where you're spinning your cells, reevaluate some of those words. So was that who I thought I was? Is that who I want to be now? Is that who I want to be in the future? And realize that you still have control over those particular words. You can change the narrative when you want. Are you working toward, well, that's my next point, actually. If you don't like that narrative, change that particular narrative. So, well, I'm known as this, I'm seen as this, but I don't want to be that. Well, you can retroactively change those particular things. It's not necessarily one definition and that's it. I mean, I'm not saying you have to completely redefine yourself, but if that's who you don't want to be as far as these particular scientific words, you can adapt those words to what your personality is, or what who you want to be seen as in lab, or who you want to be seen as at a meeting, or who you want to be seen as in your scientific community. So you are at the top branded hospital in the nation, arguably more than just the nation. I mean, how many times have you gone somewhere in this community and say, I work at St. Jude? Oh, you work at St. Jude? That's so great. You know, you get that. You know, you get pulled over by the cops. I work at St. Jude. I need to do an experiment. And they're like, okay, that's never happened to me. But one of the things that I really encourage you to do is when you're at meetings, incorporate St. Jude into your brand. And how, you ask? It's very cheap, actually. Just get a St. Jude pin. Who here has a St. Jude pin? Anybody? 1, 2, couple people? Have you worn your St. Jude pin to a meeting? Every meeting I go to, every meeting that I have gone to, I've worn my St. Jude pin. Why? Because people come up to me and they ask me about the pin. It's built-in networking. It's built-in, you're associating yourself with a successful brand. And when they come to you, that means you don't have to go to them, which is a good thing for some people. And they already associate you with a place that does good work. So use that. I mean, like, that's built-in advertising for yourself. And when you see it costs $5 to get one pin. However, today, we have a very good special. So we actually have some pins for you. Not pens, but some of these pins that if you see Karen on the way out, I think we can have some. And yes, they are available in not only silver, but gold. So if, you're trying to color coordinate with your outfit, you get one color today, go to the gift shop, get the other color so you can match everything. But you'd be surprised. I mean, I've worn this pin and, at least once an hour at the meeting when I'm kind of outside of, nobody's going to sit down next to me when somebody's talking and be like, hey, what's your pin? That's not going to happen. But, when you're getting lunch in line and stuff like that, yeah, they say, oh, what's the pin? And they're genuinely curious, and it can start a conversation. And in that conversation, you can now talk about what your brand is without actually saying the words. You can incorporate that, and you can associate yourself with a wonderful brand, which is St. Jude. All right. So that was kind of point one. The second one is professional development. So graduate school is to graduating as postdoctoral fellowship is to not everybody at once. Getting a job. That's right. Getting a job. That is the PhD is the carrot at the end of the line in graduate school. The job is the carrot at the end of the line and at your postdoc. Everything you do is leading up to getting a job. Oh, no, but I have to get the paper. Well, why do you need the paper? You want to do great science, but the paper is going to help you get a job. So there are lots of things that you really need to be focusing on to get said job. And I'd like to cover a few of the things that are here at St. Jude that some of you may know about, some of you may not know about, maybe reinforce some of the things that you've heard about, talk about how they've been helpful to me, and so on and so forth. So I said before, how can your network work for you if they don't know who you are? How can your network work for you if they don't know what you want to be? Now, if you're here for, the faculty talk part of things, which we will, also get into, they'll know that. So if you know that's what you want to be and you're at a meeting and you're talking to someone, I'm really just drop it in there. Yeah, I'm really interested in, learning more about how you became a PI because that's what I want to be. So what were some of the steps you did when you started your particular research group? How did you make that particular hire? So you kind of like, you can drop it in there without just kind of like yelling at the top of your lungs, I want to be a PI. You can ease it in there, but it's, and they will know from that, plant the seeds in their head and that will kind of go on. So that's more of the networking part of things. But if you don't have that piece of information to drop into their head at that particular moment to end that networking moment, then how are they going to be able to work for you in the future? Okay? So here's my postdoc leadership council plug. I've been waiting a while to say one of these. I've been involved with the postdoc council for a while, and I can honestly say it for an hour out of the month, 1 hour a month. So if you're doing 80 hours of a week, or 80 hours, some of you are, 80 hours every 2 weeks, 160 hours every month, considering this is it's a 40-hour work week, which it's more like 200 hours, maybe more than that per month. So we're talking about 0.5%. 0.5% of your time. And you get free lunch. In these particular meetings, you get involved with not only things that are going around St. Jude, you get involved and you can take the bull by the horns as far as your own professional development. When we have the career development series, who do you think makes the contact with those people? People in the council. And they say, okay, well, who's interested in this particular thing as a career on the council? And they say, hey, do you want to contact this person? And they contact that person, and they have a conversation, and they have lunch, and they have a job offer. Yes, that has actually happened many times. People who have gone out to lunch with the speakers have gotten a job offer because at 0.5% of their time. So if we're talking about efficiency, and you're trying to think, okay, this experiment, yes, that experiment is very important, and I really want to do that experiment. But that extra hour per week, if you're thinking about trying to get a job, it can be very helpful. So that's one of the professional development things. There's career development. I did local outreach for 2 years, and I was able to start some really cool things. One of the things was the podcast, and I got to meet some really cool people like Francis Collins, who I just emailed him and said, hey, you want to do this podcast? And I'm at St. Jude. I associated myself with the brand so I could say, hey, yes, now I'm doing this. And he said, okay, let's do it. So I got to meet Francis Collins and interview him about precision medicine and those things for the podcast to help kids. But it was something that I got because I branded myself and knew what I wanted to do in that particular moment. My professional development moment there was communication. And you can shift. Nobody says it has to be one thing at every single time. But that was an example of something I got. That was an idea I got from the council. That was something I got from the council. So it's the second Thursday of every month, 11 o'clock, 6th floor conference room in the, what building? Chili's Care Center. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you all. If you don't think it's worth it after a couple meetings, fine. But give it a try, all right? Yes? I hate to interrupt you, but we've got a couple of meetings that are going to be in different locations. Oh, okay. Just because yeah. We want you to get your free lunch. Oh, no, that's fine. It's fine. So the career development series are very good as far as if you're curious about what you want to do. I guess a lot of you are curious about faculty jobs, which is why you're here. There's a postdoc retreat that's coming up that has a lot of great professional development opportunities. So those are 3 things that I've taken advantage of. I have not done the life sci beer and biotech because I knew that doing biotech or pharmaceuticals was not something that I was really wanted to do or like something that I wanted to go into. Scientific writing. Has anyone here used a scientific writing department? One time. 2. I see a couple hands. Do you all know what the scientific writing department here does? Anybody? So this is a free service. Free. If you have an abstract, a paper, a grant, anything. You send it to them, maybe give them a few days lead time. For papers or grants, they need maybe a week. And they send it back to you with literally thousands, not tens, thousands of corrections. Saying, well, I would phrase this like this, you had a comma splice here, I would word this differently. I mean, they really go into it. Now, if your grammar is perfect and you don't need that help, fine. But all you have to do is send it to them, and you can pick reject all, because they track changes. They track changes. So that's something that I've sent my abstracts to them. I've sent out communications to them. Every single grant I've sent out. And I've actually I got the loan repayment grant, and they were very helpful and helping me with that. I mean, so I sent out a lot of things, and some of those documents may not have gotten me funded in other manners, but I used iterations of that when I was submitting my packet to my job. And I basically used a lot of the same language when I sent that off. All because, and it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost your PI anything. You send it directly to scientificediting@stjude.org. All right. Chalk Talk Prep, if you have an interview coming up. I did this with Jerry and a few other PIs, and they ripped me to shreds. It was painful, but when I actually got to the institution and gave my chalk talk, this was one was at Arizona and one was at Virginia Tech. I wasn't as intimidated. I think one of the people at one of the institutions said, if you've seen one chalk talk, you've seen one chalk talk, because they're all very different. But at least it takes some of the edge off, and I can go into how each one was different and some of the things I learned during the chalk talk as well. Informational interviews. This again ties into networking. That helps in figuring out exactly what you want to do. Let's see what else is up there. Finding communities that you have interest in. So if you and a friend are interested in the same goal, go find out together. Compare notes. I know the job situation is a little bit limited, but if you're in infectious disease, pair with somebody in cancer, so you're not competing for the same jobs, I guess, right? But really find communities that are of interest to you, and I encourage you to actually pursue them. So there's some other things that for resume writing and CV writing, write down your skill set and see if your CV or resume reflects that skill set. Ask your person in lab to help you with that. Sometimes there's the IDP, which will also help you do that as well. So these are things that are above your brand that I talked about earlier that will kind of help shape and mold what you think you're particularly good at to help you figure out maybe what the best possible position is for you. And if there are some things that are associated in the IDP, actually, there are a list of it kind of gives you a little bit of a list of traits that they look for some of those positions. So you can actually compare notes and see how that works out. But I just don't have time to do all this stuff, right? I don't have time to go to all those meetings. Well, you have to build into your schedule. You have to strategize. You have to, how do I keep on top of the literature? Do PubMed alerts and get like your, basically a scientific front page every morning of all these things. I have one on St. Jude, basically all the members of immunology. I have one on other PIs in the field. So whenever they publish something, I get it on my proverbial front page. So every morning I get like 6 or 7 PubMed emails that have a list of papers. If you're interested in a topic, I put in streptococcus. I get like 30 things a day. Just read through the titles. If one sounds interesting, click on it. Now you see the abstract, and you can go deeper from there. One of the things I started doing in grad school, and I'm sure some of you already do, is making, so if you have a scientific concept and you have your okay, where's the end? Where am I going? What does the paper look like? What does the grant look like? Write down those figures, at least the name of them. So at least you have a rubric of saying, I need this particular data for this particular goal. That will be a moving target, of course, but at least you'll have it on the piece of paper. And making a schedule also always helps. Sunday night, make that schedule what you want to accomplish in the week. It feels good to cross things out. I encourage you to encourages you to go on and cross more things out. But I forgot it, and now I don't feel like going. Well, you all are here, so I'm preaching to the choir. So this is my my little butterfly effect thing. You know, little things that you do now pay off big dividends later. I once got invited to a national meeting because of Twitter, like one tweet. I'm like, so it was one little thing there, and I'll go into that later. But one little thing sparked something great. So you never know which one of these meetings that you might have had interested in, but you kind of don't feel like going at that particular moment might spark something great. Go up to afterwards to speak to the speaker. Who knows? So along those lines, I want you all to think of a number. What percentage of your time is worth investing in finding a job? Think of a number, an actual number. This is not rhetorical. Think of an actual number. Write it down. Write down that percentage. You can write it on your sticky note. I think 10% of my time is worth it, 5% of my time, 1% of my time. But do the math and actually figure out how much that percentage is, and actually actually spend that particular time in doing the research, doing the groundwork, doing the things that will take you to the next level to get a position. Okay. Hopefully it will not be zero. So the other thing is when you're going through this, make a plan and kind of have someone who's helps you stay accountable for whatever plan you're trying to put. I mentioned Monica earlier, and she's this is actually from a G chat in 2013. So asked me how much longer I'm staying at St. Jude, and my plan was to be here for 4.5 years, and I'm very lucky to be able to say that is actually going to be what happens. I would have been here for 4.5 years before I actually leave. But I had a plan in place, and I tried to act toward that goal. So when it was time to apply, I had my packet ready. So the summer before, so I could look for all those things. I sent my packet to other people. I helped I used some of the things that I got from scientific editing. So I was ready at that particular time to try and meet my goal. Am I lucky that I met it? Absolutely. But you can't really be lucky if you don't have something in the fire, right? So I have in here, swing the bat. You got to swing the bat. So when I was, another one of my crazy stories. When I was younger, I played Little League, and I was a lot shorter than I am now. I kind of had a late growth spurt. So the first 2 years in Little League, I did not get a single hit. Not one. I got on base a lot because I was tiny. I just walked a lot. So I either walked or I struck out, right? So I remember there was this one time we were in the playoffs, and I was up to bat. And we had one of those umpires who was like really sing-songy, which was like really annoying when you struck out. It was like, strike 3. So I'm like, I don't really want to hear you, dude. I don't want to hear you. So ball 1, ball 2, strike 1, ball 3, strike 2. So I'm sitting here, full count, all right? Now, the pitcher probably knows by now, I haven't swung yet. I'm just trying to get on base. I'm trying to crouch as much as I possibly can, make the strike zone as small as I can. So I see this pitch come through right across the strike zone, but it was clearly outside, in my opinion. I still, I will swear up and down that it was actually outside. But sing-songy voice, strike 3, as if striking out down by a run in the playoffs, and at that point it was like the 5th inning out of 6 innings, wasn't bad enough. He's like torturing me with his voice. But as I'm walking back toward the dugout, trying to fight back the tears, because it hurt, I heard, you got to swing the bat. You're not going, you got to do something to actually get in the game. So what are you doing to actually get in the game? How are you swinging your bat? What things in professional development are you trying to do to get yourself aligned with the position that you want? So let's go into a little bit more of the networking. So everybody's a tool, not like that. But some of these doors are actually really hard to get into. So the people that you meet, you have to, kind of file some of those things away. How, when, and why you connect with them is important. You don't want to kind of willy-nilly connect with everybody because that might not help you. You have to kind of be focused. You have to be strategic in some of the people that you connect with because your time is precious. You don't have all that. You don't have as much time in the world. So in using people, you have to use the sharpest tool in the shed. You can't, if you're trying to align yourself with a particular position or at a meeting, and you're trying to, go after the chair. Go after the full professor. Say, hey, my name is such and such. Would you like to come see my poster? Or I'm giving a talk at this particular moment. I would love it if you were to show up. You kind of have to go after some of those tools that will help you. And wear your pen. So in that, many jobs come from secondary connections. I'm sure some of you have heard that. They don't necessarily come from the primary connection. So, somebody will say, oh, I have a friend who might need that. And then all of a sudden you get a random email. Okay, so you really have to make sure that, if you have like a LinkedIn profile, connect with people. I mean, that's something that you can do that's easy. You just connect with all the people from St. Jude, connect. So you have basically this data mine of information. Oh, I need somebody who does this. Okay, well, they're right here. I need somebody who does this. Oh, they're right here. And you reach out to them. You'd be surprised the people that actually remember you in these connections. And they'll be, sometimes they're not helpful. Sometimes they say, I can't really do that for you. But a lot of times they say, oh, yeah, I remember you from this. Oh, yeah, I'll talk to that person for you. Or, yeah, I'll talk to you. Let's set up a phone conversation. So that's a network. That's an informational interview. So as I said before, as far as like going up to that PI, going up to that professor, fortune favors the bold. I've kind of put it like this. If you're trying to get a job and, getting a job helps you get money and, that kind of helps you put food on the table. So do you like to eat? Then get out there and get a job. So I wanted to kind of touch on some of the active ways that I've tried to network while here at St. Jude, tell you a little bit how I use them, how I try to use them to not take away from my time here, but actually enhance the time here, and maybe give you some pointers on how to use them efficiently so that they don't take up a lot of your time. I don't know how much you've heard about some of these things, but they don't have to be time sucks. So LinkedIn, you make a good profile. There are some templates. There are some websites that you can look at. You have your little St. Jude shot. You have maybe like the little Memphis skyline in the background. You have your skills, your positions. You link your papers. You're done. And then you just search for people at St. Jude, and you connect with as many as you possibly can. And it'll literally take you 30 minutes. So if we go back to that percentage of time per week that you're looking, that can be one of those things. That can be one of those activities that you do in that particular percentage of time. So Twitter's one of those things where people are like, I'm not getting involved in that. Either because they're afraid of trolls or they're afraid that it takes too much time, which both are potentially true, and both actually are true depending on which area you're getting into. However, let me tell you how I've actually used Twitter, and hopefully that will help you. So my Twitter is actually connected with my the third point, which is blogging. So, I'm sure all of you have published. And when you publish something and you're trying to explain your research to somebody, you basically could type something up and put that on the blog. And now you actually have a layman's account of what you're doing. And you can actually use that blog and people will connect with that. And they've actually shown that you're more likely to get citations if you're blogging about your science. That's, if you're interested in your, H-index, that's something that can help. If more people see your science, I would gather, it's something that's important to you. I would think that that's a good thing, right? So with Twitter, one of the things that I did was, with that particular blogging community, you can make these things called lists, right? So you can say, I want to add all these people to a list. So what I did one day in a 30-minute period of time, one of those percentages again, so this could be the next week, is I looked for every single person. I basically did a search for Professor and microbiology. And a list of about 100 people came up. I mean, people who were editors at particular journals, people who were editors at journals that I want to, send my research to. Like, not just like the low man on the totem, but I mean, like, managing directors who are also running their own lab or running a department, chairs of departments. And you basically add them to a list. Now, what did I call that list? I called it microimmunoprofessors. And in that, you actually have some subtext to that. You can give a description to that list. And I said, my list of microbiology, immunology professors, a list I hope to add myself to someday. And when you add somebody to a list, they can see that you add them to a list. So I basically advertised to 100 PIs that I'm looking for a job in 30 minutes. You can do the same thing for cancer, developmental biology, structural biology. I mean, these are things that are quick fixes. I mean, and you don't have to be on Twitter 24/7 to have an impact. You can look at what somebody said. You can basically look at this list, see what people have said, comment to them, because now they're on the same playing field. Twitter's a lot less formal than sending an actual email. So you type a quick, 140 character thing to a prominent member in the field, and they will actually respond to you. They actually do. If they are tweeting things out, then they will respond to you. So now you have a different level of communication with that person that's not necessarily an email. It's not necessarily something at the meeting. And it's something that you can actually think about before you type and send out to them. And you can have a little back and forth. Maybe it's about a journal article that they publish. Oh, I really liked your work in this article. I thought this was a great finding. Oh, thanks. So you've made that connection already. So that's something that you can use. And, there are actually programs to help you manage it. There's TweetDeck, so you can actually sit at home and say, okay, I'm going to send out 5 tweets in this week. And you basically line them up in like a 10-minute span. They can be articles that you're interested in, things that you just want to say. I mean, a lot of the things that the immunology and microbiology people tweet out is scientific articles. So now I have a real-time list of things that are important to them. And I can look at that list and say, well, maybe this is the hot trending topic. Maybe this is an area I need to look at. Maybe this is a person I need to collaborate with. So you can do that as a postdoc. You can do that in several different venues. So the blogging I started as a means to kind of just combat scientific stupidity. That was more kind of a personal thing, but it kind of grew into something that was a little bit more professional. And it actually did offer me job opportunities from that. So people, they said, okay, well, you're doing this. You'll be good at this particular communication job. And I basically said, well, that's very flattering and I'm kind of interested, but, I think the PI track was the way to go for me. With that, I kind of mentioned the interviews and the podcast earlier. That was something that some of you all might have seen the email that I sent out maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, trying to get some people to kind of help me kind of leave that podcast here. But it's one of those things where I basically sought out the search committee chair of a department like at UNC with. So this is one example. There's Peggy Cotter. She's now the president of ASM. She wasn't at that particular moment. But I said, hey, do you want to do this podcast for kids? So I was using that as a networking tool. And lo and behold, they had a job search the year after that. And I, talked to the chair and talked to her, and they said, I want you to apply. Please apply. Now, I had another offer in hand before they could make a decision, but, they invited me to apply for that particular position. So, if you're being invited to apply, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get it. But at least they'll look at your stuff, right? And I mentioned meetings with your pin on, and then Facebook. I use that to kind of share scientific articles and connect, just stay connected with some of my grad school friends. But these are a lot of medias that you can actually use. And again, you don't have to spend hours upon hours each day. Honestly, my wife and kids would not let me stay on social media as much. So it's one of those things where you can really do it in 5 minutes a day. You really can manage all this stuff in 5 minutes a day, and it can have a tremendous impact. If they don't tweet you back or, you don't tweet them right away, it doesn't really matter. It's all there just waiting. It's like an email. Like it's just waiting. So these are all different ways that you can network outside of the just the normal channels of networking. So hopefully you've gotten some new ideas from this. So when it comes down to it, a lot of you are here, and we'll get into the Ask Me Anything. It's maybe one or two slides more. As far as what is your plan for moving forward for your career? Because, you're on the path of your scientific career, but right now you're a postdoc, and that's by definition a transitional period. There's no one who's a postdoc who's in their 70s. They are either a staff scientist. They have a new job title at that point, right? So all of you, all of the postdocs here, because I know there's some of you here that are not postdocs, this is still a transitional point. The point of your postdoc, yes, you want to publish, you want to do great research, you want to make your boss famous. Hopefully my people make me famous in the future. But you want to get a job. You really want to get a job. So hopefully some of these things will that I've said will help you get there. So as I kind of said, really take time to figure out your brand. Really try and figure out what you want to do, and through professional development alleys, and really try and find people, seek them out, talk to them to find out where you want to be and how you want to get there. So with that, we'll get to the Ask Me Anything. So you can ask me about my time here. I mentioned I am married with kids. You can talk work-life balance, basically anything up there. Feel free, and if you need to go, thank you for coming. Yes.
So why did you choose to become a PI versus the opportunities that you got from your blog and the communication that you've done?
It was one of those things that I always, in graduate school, that was what it's like, oh, you want to be a PI, you want to be a PI, you want to be a PI, you want to be a PI. So that kind of got ingrained in me in the beginning, that's what I really wanted to do. But I did kind of have a moment where I had to really, truly ask myself, like, why do I want to be a PI? And the truth of the matter was, I really enjoyed the science that I was doing. I wanted to take it in a new direction, and I had too many ideas that I could do myself in that particular career, or that particular lab, right? So I was in Jason Rosh's lab for 3 years, and what ended up happening is I eventually transitioned to immunology in Doug Green's lab, but the project that I take forward will be from the work that I did in Jason's lab. But I had so many, I want to do this, 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 and I don't have the manpower, I don't have the time, I need money, I need a team, and that's kind of when I say, if that's what I want to do, then that kind of sounds like being a PI. So after some soul searching, talking to people, I actually threw up a prayer and said, just make this clear. Just don't tell me which one it is. Just make the choice clear. And other things faded away, and I had the offer at Arizona sitting on the table. It was kind of crazy. I got the offer 20 minutes after the chalk talk, which was, my mouth kind of dropped. It was one of those moments where I said, I have to use the bathroom real quick. And I'm like texting my wife as fast as I can. You won't believe what happened to me. It was one of those moments. But it was a lot of self-reflection and realizing, trying to figure out what I liked about science. And I really enjoyed the mentoring aspect. Not just like, I've gone into high schools, I've done that kind of thing. But really, I had some mentees in my lab in grad school. I had some mentees here in my postdoc. And, actually working with them, seeing the light bulbs come on, seeing how they progress, seeing how we got, some really good answers, developing a great question to try and answer. Those things were what excited me the most. So that's why I pursued that. Yes?
Hey, my name is Brady. I have a similar question, similar thought. Looking at your all background and talk, what you did is, I think, your job suited mostly for industry purposes, like networking or all what you're doing. For faculty job, like you applied, you don't need basically all this. You just need your papers or your resume or something is very polished. Even without network, you can get the PI job, faculty job, particularly, yes. Right? So, what are your thoughts on this?
So when I started off this, I said like this was my way was definitely non-conventional. So it's my hope that And when you're looking for that faculty, some of these extras that you do will actually will get you there. So one of the things is staying in contact with maybe your old PI. So one of the ways that I got this Arizona job was, again, I didn't actually apply to a job on a whim. I was invited to apply to all the particular jobs for PI. And that was all through networking. That was all through connections that I made maybe on Twitter or through other people, basically trying to go to meetings and saying, getting myself noticed by, going up to people and having that brand so that other people could speak on my behalf. So it turns out that same person who hired me, and I stayed in very good connection with that person. He actually went to he was the chair of immunology there, and he actually went to a place called Arizona. So he, remembered my work, and I had many conversations with him on the phone, like saying, "Hey, I still want to use you as a mentor. I still want to keep this this contact going." One, because he was a valuable mentor, but two, he was a great. I talked about the tool. He was one of the sharpest tools in the shed. So you want to align yourself with things that are good, like St. Jude, or as far as your brand. So it was that type of connection that got me in the door there. Now I still had to perform while I was there, but that was based on networking. My papers. I don't have a Nature paper. I don't have a Science paper. I don't have a Cell paper. But what I do is I have and this is something that I got from my trying to explain my research as far as communication, either through my blog or when some of the tours come through. I did some of the tours, and I was able to distill my story in such a way that it was just that. It was a story. So I said, well, here's the story here, and then here's part 2. Don't you want to help me get to part 2? Don't you want to see where part 2 leads to part 3? You were able to I was able to build on that communication using some of the skills that I use here. Have you ever tried to explain your research in a tweet? You have to really know what you're talking about, right? Like, you have to really know how to really craft it so that, I'm working on this particular problem. And you can't just say, oh, you can't just write cancer for the 140 characters, right? You actually have to really go into depth. And I've just used cancer because we're here at St. Jude. I know all you don't work on cancer. I don't work on cancer. But I'm not saying that the other way is wrong. The other way is completely right. That is a great way to do it. You get the high impact paper. What I am saying is that this will be a great supplement to that. And these are things that maybe not everybody has thought of to do, but hopefully in using some of these aspects, they'll help you at least break out they'll help you stand out. They'll help your they'll help your application go to the top of the pile. Because how many times have you seen a person who came in and spoke, and you've met with this person, and you didn't get a good vibe for them? They had a Science and Nature paper 1 year after, they had, 2, high impact journals, and then all of a sudden you meet them and you're like, really? Do these people match? Right? So, a lot of that trying to get yourself to match with your CV is who you want yourself to be, about your brand and about your identity. So I'm hoping that those aspects can help you in the more traditional path. Hopefully that was a very long-winded answer but hopefully I answered your question. So very carefully. I try and make it home for dinner. Sometimes I have to pick up the kids. Sometimes I have to be the one who stays home with the kids because they're sick. But my email is usually open, when I'm sitting on the couch, or, there are some times where I want to read some papers up at 12. But I try and plan with some admission, it's been really difficult. As far as how now this job is playing out, there's been some family tragedies. Trying to be there at your kid's final day of karate where she breaks a board. How do you prioritize, right? You just kind of have to say at the end of it all, what's going to matter. And I said it to my grad school PI, and I said it to in some respect to Jason. I didn't say it to Doug. But I said, if you make me choose between my family and my job, then I'm going to choose my family. You're just going to lose. And that was something that that was my priority. That was part of my identity in that particular moment. And that was just a call that I had to make. And sometimes standing up for that, and being that person, being upfront about that, and say, look, let's have some realistic goals. I will do things that you want me to do. I'm not gonna overpromise and then undersell. If anything, I'm gonna say, given, I will have result by this day, given A, B, C, D, E, F, G, go right. Right, so you don't want to, and that was a large part of it. Like, because sometimes family comes first. You have to leave. You have to do that stuff, and that can disrupt your experiment. But in that particular process, I had to say, well, that's just the sacrifice that I have to make for my family. And, it's one of those things where I just wanted to put them first. I felt like I owed it to them to put them first. And there are days that I was less productive in lab because of that. But I tried to make it up in reading some things at home and planning out some experiments and trying to set up alerts so I could stay current and trying to plan out my week so I could be as efficient as possible when I got to work and just basically hit the ground running and have, things, multiple things working at the same time. And in the beginning, I was able to do that. It's been more difficult lately. But, that was the balance. I mean, it was basically, to balance something, you have to know how much it weighs to you. And I knew how much more my family weighed as far as in my heart, or as far as like my priority compared to my position. So once I figured out what the relative ratios were and the weights, then it was easy to balance it because I knew exactly what it meant. Any other questions? What's up? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You can use the fancy mics.
What all do they ask when you go for a faculty interview?
So each person's different. Sometimes you go into a person's office and you kind of get a read about them in the first 2 minutes. And you say, they start just talking about their research. And if they pull out a grant, just strap yourself in and say, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, just seem really, interested about it. So I had some people who didn't ask me hardly anything. You just basically try and interject what you work on. And, you have to be proactive in asking them questions. But one of the things what they asked me is like, okay, and this kind of goes to maybe in the chalk talk part of things. They said, okay, here's, what's your first R01? Go. You have to have an answer. And one of the things that they look for is how prepared you are to explain your answer. You can verbally do it, but what you hopefully do, and what I learned in the practice talk here, is you pick up a marker and you write down a few words for each aim, and then you just basically direct back to that particular thing. So, well, how are you going to do that experiment? There's like the really tricky balance, right? If you go too in depth in your experimental, then they're going to pick apart the details. If you're too global, they're going to say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. So you have to kind of, unfortunately, gauge the audience and say, kind of look at people in the eyes, see if they're paying attention or if their eyes are glazed over, if they understand what you're talking about. In that particular scenario, making eye contact with basically each person in the room was really important. But as far as some of the questions that they asked me, they say, what would your research program look like? Which is basically what's your R1? What other ideas do you have? Who would you collaborate with in the department here? How would your ideas connect with the people in the department, with the people at the institution? Do you have these ideas free and clear, or will your old lab be competing with you? That was a big question that they wanted to know. Let's see. Others will probably come to me later as far as what they asked. I mean, nobody really asked me about my family, and they actually said, "Don't bring up your family in those particular." But again, as I said before, family is a big part of my life. So I just basically said, even if as I'm interviewing, which is probably one of the dumbest things to say, because basically I just wanted to get a read on them on how they saw me. I said, yeah, one of the most important things is my wife getting a position when she gets here. Like, my family life is important. And because I kind of wanted to, because I knew off the bat, if I get a position here and they don't care about my family life, then I'm not going to be happy here. If I say that and they say, oh yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about, then they care about family life, and that's somewhere that I want to be. So it was a bad idea globally, but it was a gambit on my part that, I don't want to work somewhere where you don't appreciate that. And sometimes being proactive with them questions kind of draws questions out of them. Now you're getting them to talk about their family and their relationships, and that makes you more personable as a person. And then they see, oh, this is somebody I could hang out with. That's what kind of they want. They want somebody they can hang out with for the next 20 to 30 years. They want your science to be good, but they don't want a warm body. They want like somebody with a personality.
So I don't know if there were any, but what were some of the points that you negotiated on?
I had a list of startup equipment that I thought I needed to start up my lab, and when I did all the math, it was a little short for the first 3 years. So I said, at least in year one, either we're going to need to front load the money so I can get the equipment that I need, or we're going to have just more money overall. So in doing so, and I didn't really negotiate until I got I was sure that I wanted that position. So I said, look, here's my list. I am prepared. I've looked at the Fisher catalog. These are how much things cost. If you want me to be successful here, which I know you do want me to be successful here, this is what I need. Because I want to have a technician, I want to have a grad student, I want to have a postdoc, and I need these pieces of equipment. I need this money so I can do this experiment. And my burn rate for the month, which, I talked to people in the lab, I talked to people in the previous lab, what their burn rates were, so I could make an informed decision on what I thought mine would be in a microbiology setting. So I basically, if you're going to negotiate something, I negotiated money in my startup. I didn't negotiate salary because that was pretty much set. I mean, it was one of those things where you could look at the website and see what everybody was getting because it was public. It's public domain information. So if you're going to negotiate something, negotiate for equipment, negotiate for startup money, negotiate for for them to cover a FTE. So I didn't get the FTE, but I did get an extra $50,000. So I was like, okay.
So would you suggest just negotiating just
Negotiate everything you think you need to. If you think you need it, then negotiate. It's like, well, one of the things that was in my negotiation was, unless I feel like my wife is getting a job here, sorry, I can't accept. Like, I mean, that's who I am, take it or leave it. And, she turned in her resume, and like 2 days later, there was a job position that happened to match her resume exactly. I'm like, well, they clearly are interested, right? They're clearly like putting things in motion to make this happen. So if they did that, if they took care of me on that end, then they're going to probably take care of me on the back end. If they say, I'm not meeting any of your demands, take it or leave it, then that's probably how they're going to be on the back end too. But I felt that when I was making that decision, I felt that they were making truly good faith efforts in the negotiation process and actually adhering to some of the things that I said that I wanted. They were listening, they were perceptive, had a couple of different versions of the letter of the offer letter that really put it through. So I always say those are the things. I mean, but the end all being is, if it's important to you, if you think that you need it for your research to thrive, for your family life to thrive, then ask it, because all they can say is no. I mean, that's your moment in the sun to actually, that's your leverage point. If they've already said that they want you, now you can leverage that as much as you possibly can. Yeah. So, but yeah, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. If you don't ask for the interview, you're not going to get it. If you don't ask the person to come to your poster, you're not going to get it. So, any other questions? Yes.
How about the normal statistics? Something like how many applications you submitted, how many interviews you got?
So I applied to UNC, but I was for their microbiology search, but I had gotten the position from Arizona first. I applied via the Statman for the NIH, mostly because this was the conference I got invited to because of a tweet. They had this Future Leaders Research Conference. A guy by the name of Kenny Gibbs, who does a lot of like PhD outcomes, he said, we just don't have enough people in the pipeline. So I typed in a tweet, the thing from Horton Hears a Who. We are here, we are here, we are here. He was like, let me get back to you. Hey, can you send me your packet? Which I had ready. So all of a sudden I get all these emails later on that night of him saying, hey, this is the person I talked to you about earlier. Here's his packet. because he knew who I was. He knew what I wanted to be. So because of that, I applied. Because of that program, that conference, I applied to the Statman. I applied to UNC, as I said. I applied to Virginia Tech, and it was basically coming down between Virginia Tech and Arizona. And basically, Virginia Tech wasn't ready to move as fast as Arizona was actually moving. Like Arizona came in the game like late and just took off. But those were the only places that those 4 places are the only places I applied to for faculty positions. Like I said, I didn't apply to anywhere that I wasn't invited to apply. I mean, and if I didn't get a job this year, next year would have been different. I would have been sitting out everything I possibly could have. But, that was what I had at hand. So I guess UNC was an incomplete because they knew that I got the position. Virginia Tech was an incomplete because there were two departments, and one they just basically thought I would be better suited toward a more biomedical thing, but that department was undergoing a change in dean, so they couldn't really offer me. But she was like, "I'm sorry to let you go, but we don't have something at this time." But given another 6 to 8 months, that might have panned out. And then I had the Arizona position that did pan out. So I can't do the fractions in my head, but I got 1 out of the 4 as far as like kind of the partial of the other ones. Yes.
So how much of a startup money and technician postdoc do you get to hire to start with?
So I got $750 for 3 years, and then a $10,000 moving budget, and then I negotiated, and that's front loaded toward the end. Front loaded toward the beginning, so I could buy capital equipment and regular equipment, and then it kind of trails off. I think it's like 350, 250, 100, and then 50. But the extra negotiation, I got an extra 50 in the first year, so it became 400, 250, 100, and then 50 in year 4. So that doesn't cover my salary does not come out of that. But I do have to pay technicians and graduate students and postdocs, and I have to pay overhead on them as well. So hopefully by year 4 I'll have some funding so that I can keep those people on track. But yeah, that was my package. Yes.
Was your decision to choose your research focus or your new lab strategic or based on your general interest?
It was more my general interest. So one of the things that I saw when I was starting off in grad school, when I looked at some of these science and cell papers, I saw that they had a lot of different techniques in it. You didn't just see a biochemistry only paper in Cell. That just didn't happen. So if you wanted to understand the thing you need to look at, you need to understand biochemistry. You need to understand the animal model. You needed to understand the in vivo assay. You needed to understand the cellular work. So what I tried to do was try to figure out how to do all of those, but specialize in one of those areas. So I could speak to each. So I started off biochemistry, biophysics, doing structural biology. I went to infectious disease, and I really became interested in metals and how they play a role in bacterial homeostasis. So that became my focus, my goal, what I really was interested in looking at. But the other labs were just kind of like, I need to know this technique. So after Jason's lab, that became like, this is something that I really want to work on. Talked to him, got the projects free and clear, had a clear direction on where I wanted to go with those. I had the vision for that particular project. Some things you work on, you don't have vision for you just kind of like, I'm doing this just to do it. For that one, I felt like I had vision, and he had agreed to let me work on those things, and he wouldn't be a competitor in that field. He didn't even apply for an R01 based on that research, so that when it was time for me to do it, it'd be kind of fresh. But those were, it was something I felt passionate about. I can kind of I can whip myself up on some other things, but that was kind of like, at that time, that was my heart. Even moving forward, it's still my heart. So that's that. And even I talked to a person at my grad school advisor, and he's not moving forward with my grad school project. So I called him up and said, hey, can I have that one back? And let me tell you, that actually really helped. So when I went into the job, when I went into the room and said, here's my first R01, but here's a completely separate R01 based on something that I got from my postdoc. So here's a completely other, well thought out idea. And that idea was actually on something having to do with bacterial pilus. And lo and behold, they had a bacterial pilus expert. So it just kind of worked out. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when you say to somebody 40% of proteins involve a metal cofactor, and you say you have this list of proteins, they say, oh, well, what do I have here? What do I have here? That might be able to attach you. One of the other things that really helped me is, and this kind of comes back to the what questions that they ask sometimes, or it's like sometimes you have to sit back and listen to what they're saying. Even if they're spelling out your grant, you really have to be an active listener. Because there was one person who talked about a particular protein pathway that just came up in her a screen that she ran, and then the next day somebody else talks about that protein. I said, I think she just found a hit about that protein. Really? I need to talk to her. So like after the fact, they come up to me and they say, we're collaborating now. This is great. You connected us. I was like, well, that goes to the whole connection thing. So, it's, yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks for sticking around and enjoy the rest of your day.